All right. So, real quick, I know I've said some stuff about Sakura in the past, and also said some stuff about Madara in the past that are kind of incompatible with what I'm going to be saying in this video. I get it. I don't believe all of those things anymore. Let's not bring them up. All right, cool, thanks. So another thing, actually, two things, not just one. Just hear me out. Just hear me out for a second. So, could Sakura beat Madara? Well, it depends. And I don't mean on like where they fight or what intel each one of them has or whatever. I don't care about any of that. That's not what I'm talking about. I mean, maybe it'll come up later, but like the important thing is which version of each character we're talking about. I talked about this on Twitter with a couple people, and I don't feel like I should have to say this, but just to be safe, I mean, like, you got some free time. Like, don't get on to me for stating the obvious, like you don't, like you got somewhere to be or something, all right? So, this Sakura is not the same as this Sakura, okay? This Sakura is not the same as this Sakura. None of these Sakuras are really even similar, like, at all, especially if we're talking about combat ability. It's the same thing as, like, this Madara and this Madara aren't the same, and neither one is the same as this Madara, who isn't the same as this Madara either. So the reason I say all of this is because I want everybody to know better than to, well, let's use an analogy, actually, right? If this Madara could throw a rock, like, let's say 69 meters, and for whatever reason, in a hypothetical fight with, say, Girlboss, Madara needed to be able to throw a rock at least 55 meters. Well, in this case, it would be pretty fair to assume that this Madara, and especially this Madara, would be able to clear the 50-meter rock throwing challenge. Now, on the other hand, let's say we knew Girlboss's rock throwing record was 75 meters. And for whatever reason, part of their deathmatch involved a rock throwing competition. I don't know how the outcome would affect the fight, but, you know, just play along, all right? It wouldn't really be fair, I'm sure you would agree, to say, well, see, man, I don't think Madara can do it because his record is 69 meters, Girlboss is 75. It seems pretty clear because obviously it would be fair to assume that Madara had gotten stronger since then. So what I'm trying to say is it's fair to bring up feats that belong to a weaker version of a character when talking about a stronger version of them if you're using them to establish what the stronger version of that character should be capable of at the bare minimum. It's a little bit different to use anti-feats or limits ascribed to weaker versions of a character to try and say that a stronger version of that character shouldn't be capable of something, right? And let's add something else to the analogy too. Let's say we swap out adult Madara for kid Madara in the Girlboss fight, but we still have the rock throwing competition, right? It wouldn't really be fair to say that Madara summoned a meteor from outer space, so he should be able to throw a rock 62 miles. Now, if you're still with me here, and we both agreed with everything that I just said, then we should also be willing to agree that if I say adult Sakura, like from Boruto, could beat Madara, like the one that fought Hashirama in the final valley with the 9 tails. Stuff like this shouldn't really, this shouldn't be relevant, right? Like, we can ignore this because Boruto era Sakura is a lot stronger than the Sakura that's getting handled in this image, and the Madara that's giving her the business is a lot stronger than the Madara we're talking about in this fight. So this, totally not indicative of how this fight would turn out at all. Alright, so now that all that's out of the way, let's actually start comparing these two. As for Madara, I don't really think I have to talk about him that much, or better yet, at all. I think my bases are covered there. I've talked about Madara pretty extensively in older videos, so we can mostly skip him for now, though I think most people would agree that we probably need to establish like some point of reference for him. Otherwise, no amount of discussing Sakura's abilities will really matter because like we won't have an idea of what Madara could do. So I think we can all agree that Kaguya is stronger than Valley of the End Madara. Don't think that's a very hot take. Now, Sakura did damage Kaguya, like with a regular punch. And you can make all sorts of excuses for Kaguya here if you want, but the fact still remains at the end of the day that she did seem pretty hurt by one of Sakura's punches. And this isn't like a Goku getting damaged by a ray gun situation, because it's illustrated. Well, I mean, like, first of all, that's Dragon Ball rules anyway, so it's not really like applicable to Naruto. But even then, even if we did assume that these two universes operated in the same way, Goku was clearly stated to be off guard in that situation, and I don't mean like a little bit surprised, like he was totally relaxed. Whereas Kaguya here was in the middle of fighting for her life against Naruto and Sasuke. And she'd just been damaged by Kakashi too. Like, there's really no reason to assume that she's not using chakra to defend herself. Now, I'm not saying that Sakura could beat Kaguya one-on-one. That would obviously be ridiculous. But it is pretty impressive for her to have damaged Kaguya, especially when you're comparing her to somebody like Madara. Kaguya was blatantly stated to be stronger than Six Paths Madara. Whether you think she'd actually beat him in a fight, kind of irrelevant here. Her, like, raw chakra power level was higher than Madara's was. And again, that Madara was way stronger than the Madara we're talking about here, and Sakura managed to hurt her, at least enough to cause her to flinch and keep her from doing anything that could have protected her from Naruto and Sasuke sealing her with Chibaku Tensei. So, now that we got all these facts laid out on the table, I personally think it's fair to infer from these facts that Sakura would probably be capable of damaging Madara too, unless you really, really, really give Kaguya, like, every benefit of the doubt. Now, this Sakura, the very same one that damaged Kaguya, is significantly weaker than the Sakura that we're talking about in this fight, because there's a whole lot of time between the Kaguya fight and the Boruto era, and over the course of the time skip, everyone seems to have received some pretty crazy power-ups. Like, okay, whether you like it or not, Kinshiki and Momoshiki should, at the very least, even if you lowball them, be somewhere around Kaguya's level. They were described as potentially greater threats than her, so I think at the bare minimum, they've got to be somewhat comparable to her, right? And then it's like, even after that is established, characters that aren't Naruto or Sasuke, characters without Six Paths powers, just fight them. And I don't know about you, but to me it looked like they were doing okay. Right, like, it seems like we have a sort of Dragon Ball Super situation on our hands here, where, I don't know, Krillin or Tien could beat Super Buu, right? Like, it doesn't feel correct, and it probably shouldn't be true, but clearly it is. And for anybody who might be thinking, well, that's the 5 Kage, why would Sakura have received a similar power-up? Well, there are other examples of things like this. A really good one being Shikamaru locking down Kinshiki with Shadow Possession. Even if that doesn't do it for you, Sakura is directly compared to Gaara in the Gaara Hiden novel. And to paraphrase that book, what it basically says is that most medical ninja can't match somebody who's on, like, Gaara's level with their taijutsu, but Sakura was a notable exception. Whether you like it or not, when you have confirmation that Sakura's on the same level as some guy who was keeping up with another guy who was able to blow through the majestic attire Susanoo, I just don't know how I can say in good faith that she isn't stronger than Madara is. Now, you don't have to rely completely on the fact that Boruto has wacky power scaling if you want to argue that Sakura could beat Madara, but it's definitely the least controversial reason you could provide. There's other stuff like her fight with Shin, the fact that Kishimoto strongly implied that she was at least catching up to Naruto and Sasuke, yada yada yada. But I don't want to get into anything else here. The video's already gonna make enough people mad, so I will just stick with, she punched Kaguya. Kaguya seemed pretty hurt. Then she got way more powerful over like 10 years or whatever. So in conclusion, I'm not gonna say that Sakura could beat Madara, but what I will say is, if she walked up to him and punched him, even if he, like, had the whole Susanoo thing going on, whatever, I don't really care what sort of defensive measures Madara takes. No matter what, if he stands there and lets her punch him, yeah, he'll probably die.